Today's guest is described on her LinkedIn profile on one of the testimonials as being, I quote, a legend of the enterprise software world, unquote. And it's unsurprising. Anwen Robinson, a brilliant storyteller with some incredible anecdotes and some incredible lessons, and also the UK general manager for one of the biggest and most successful ERP software firms in the world, Infor. Anwen hails from the Rhondda Valley in South Wales. She is an engineer and also a passionate advocate of getting more women into STEM subjects. We talk about this. We talk about her journey progressing through the ranks, becoming a director and then a managing director. But we also discuss her unique take on leadership, the importance of curiosity and authenticity, managing change in a very male-dominated industry, and also her incredible work mentoring young people. I think at the end of this 45 minutes or so, you will absolutely love her and you will have taken so much value from what she's told us. It's Anwen Robinson. So Anwen, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. How are you today?
Very good, thank you. And my pleasure to be talking with you, Gareth.
Let me start off with this one, Anwen. What does good leadership mean to you?
Oh, that's a cracking question to start off with. Being a leader implies you're leading somewhere, all right? You go in somewhere in that regard. So my view, and from my point of view, a leader is someone who actually understands and can clearly articulate sort of what that journey is, the strategic imperatives. And that applies to whatever you're doing in life. Obviously, if you're coming at it from a business point of view, then having absolute clarity on what the business strategy is. So everything starts from that point. A leader is somebody then who can sort of motivate, persuade, cajole, direct where necessary, so that people actually follow them on that journey. My role, and what I'm actually doing in the organization I'm with at the moment, is to create an environment where people can actually make the right strategic decisions for themselves. So in other words, my role is to create leaders, all right, so that people are empowered on that journey. And once I'm completed on that, I will walk off into the sunset. My job is done.
Brilliant. That's a great answer. So let's go back to the beginning then, okay? I want to go back to your formative years, growing up in the South Wales valleys. What did young Anwen want to be when she grew up?
I grew up in the Rhondda Valley. There you go. So a working class family, etc. Nobody had sort of gone to university. Was very able sort of academically, but actually I just wanted to go out and earn some money. So I left school at 16. And I actually found a job with Glamorgan County Council at the time. And I was in the heating and ventilating department of the architects department. I just wanted to earn money in my pocket. We didn't have a lot of money when we were growing up, and that was probably the very compelling reason for me.
Sure. You must have been curious with technology, though.
So I mentioned that I was working in the drawing office, literally no technology at all sort of hand-drawn on the paper. But I quickly realized that, in actual fact, if I wanted to get on and earn more, because that was my compelling sort of factor at that point, then I needed to have the relevant qualifications. So I started actually doing the work, doing the heat loss calculations, for within the department. But I could never get any recognition for that because I didn't actually have relevant qualifications. So I actually went back to day release. I managed to get day release to the Rhondda College of Further Education.
Sounds like you were in jail, Anwen.
And the only course that was relevant to the job that I had was mechanical engineering. So I actually signed up to do an ordinary national certificate in mechanical engineering. I loved it. I loved everything I was actually doing about within engineering. All right. So it was actually the drawing skills and everything else, which played to my artistic bent anyway. But everything actually on the practical application of everything that I was actually learning and all the material, all of the things that were involved in it. And I think if you're engaged and you really enjoy the experience, it becomes easy. So I excelled. And I can remember I was the only girl in the class of ONC, so engineers, and I had distinctions across the board. And I can remember when I had the results, I opened telling people that fantastic, I've got sort of distinctions ONC. And they said, you do appreciate that's equivalent to A-levels. So I went to work that day and I phoned up Cardiff University and I said, I've just been told that this is equivalent to A-levels. Does that mean that this would be accepted on any courses? So engineering in particular, I was interested in taking forward. And they said, pop up in your lunch hour and we'll introduce you to the sort of the head of department. They offered me a place on the spot. So I signed up to do it was a 5-year honours degree in mechanical engineering. So by the time I went home that evening to my parents, I was going to university. But your original question was about technology.
Yes.
And the application of technology. And that came during my degree course and everything else, because a core part of the engineering degree was actually computer science. But this is the start of my introduction to technology. So it was a key part of the course itself. And over that time, I was out in industry for 18 months, working on sort of production lines with one job. Another job, I actually went to work for the Property Services Agency, part of Welsh Government.
Okay.
Yeah, and they manage all of the sort of government buildings, etc., on all of the facilities around Wales. And I was actually reporting directly into the engineer for Wales at that point in time. So again, sort of exposure to different types of technology, but actually a practical hands-on. I actually had a number of months where I was working at the Royal Mint in Llantrisant.
Oh, yes, been there many times, yeah.
And this was to give me practical hands-on experience on the shop floors. But then they had to give me a project that I had to write up as part of my work experience. And I can remember the project to this day, where I had to, first of all, come up with a design and then cut out the metal, fabricated, welded all up. And it was a pair of knickers. They had me sort of design, draw, very complex style, as you can imagine there. But that was their idea of fun. It was great fun. Being a young girl in a man's world, you quickly learned how to deal with all of those aspects. And I got it it was a fantastic experience of welding, fabrication, actually on sort of scraping the bearings that, the big presses that are used in the mints. I graduated a 2-1 honours degree in mechanical engineering. I was the only girl on the course, by the way, with 73 young men. So that was great.
Bloody hell. There couldn't have been many female mechanical engineering graduates in Wales, full stop, at that point, I wouldn't have thought.
It wasn't. And I can remember having careers advice when I was in school. And it's right. So what's available for me? And it was nursing, teaching, banking, hairdressing, and that was it.
And that was about it,
fine, thank you for that advice, and I'm going to ignore all of that and forge my own path in terms of it. But no, you're right. So I was the only one on the degree course, and I don't think it's changed that much up to these days, which is a great shame.
Yeah, I think so. I'd like to come back to that. But before we move any further, Anwen, one thing that I'm absolutely fascinated about is that you're a young lady growing up in the valleys. Most of your friends weren't pursuing mechanical engineering. You got into university in a very unconventional way.
Yep.
You obviously had bags of drive, bags of ambition, and you really wanted to get somewhere, which is probably a bit different to most of your friends, correct me if I'm wrong. Where does this drive come from?
Do you know what? Probably at that time, I wouldn't have recognized that. I just knew that I wasn't happy with what was being put in front of me. So I'd look for other options. I wouldn't settle for doing that. But I wouldn't say that I recognize that in myself. It just it was what it was. But over the years, I have seen it, and it's been quite interesting because, as you say, it was an unconventional start. But everything I go into, you get hurdles, you get difficulties put in front of you, and what I've done is to look at the options that are provided, and you make decisions. You've got to be brave sometimes, all right? And you step through the door, and further options then open up for you. But you've got to be brave to take that first step. And I've always been brave to take that first step. I was actually asked to do a podcast quite recently as well. And I was asked to reflect on what are the 7 lessons that you learned that you'd like to sort of share over the course. And my goodness, when you sit back and you actually think about that, it's like writing your own obituary, when you think back over your life and everything. And one of the key things that I came up with was, I think we all sometimes have that little voice in our head, right, that says, you're not good enough. Do you really want to do that? You haven't done that before. And I think females in particular are very subject to that little voice in the head that says, am I quite good enough and everything else there? Over the years, I learned to quieten that, to say, what's the worst thing that can happen? All right?
Yeah.
You fail. Yeah, but if you don't try, you will absolutely fail. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it's, I think once you come to that realization, and keep asking, what's the worst possible thing that can happen? And then you think, well, actual fact, if you don't know something, be honest, admit it and say, but I'll learn. All right.
Yes.
Make sure that you build great networks that can help you. Make sure that, stay humble through all of these things are the things that I learned along the way that I think were underpinned my approach to life, in actual fact. I do a lot of mentoring these days and just share these lessons that I've learned, and hopefully that makes a difference to people going through similar experiences.
That's really inspiring, Anwen. You know what? You touched upon something there, which I think will resonate with a lot of people, because I think so many people are held back by this fear of looking stupid. Whereas if you just are willing to ask questions, maybe they're stupid questions. If you're able to ask questions and be very clear with where you really are, I think good things generally happen then, don't they?
I would underline that with 3 lines and say 100% correct, all right? And I always respect somebody far more just if they're honest and say, actually, I don't know the answer to that, to somebody that will either try to fob their way through and that they don't understand it. Give me somebody, and I interview a lot of people that are prepared to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out, and I'll come back to you. And don't be afraid to fail. That's the other thing. I think it also, the phrase "wisdom comes with age." I feel very wise these days, Gareth.
Well, look, I mean, it's because you've experienced a lot, and you've probably failed with a lot, and you've got the battle scars, and you come through it with wisdom. That's what life's all about, isn't it?
No, absolutely. So I'm now on this is the third company I'm with now, where I'm managing director of the third company. And so each time I've been asked to take on the role, and they were companies that were in transition. Obviously, being technology companies, there's a huge amount of disruptive change that's happening in technology at the moment. And if you ignore those changes, at your peril, all right? So you have to keep sure, ensuring that the company moves forward. But again, coming back to that first question, you have to make sure you bring the company with you as well. You can't say, right, this is what we were doing, but we're now going to be shifting 180 degrees. And by the way, just do what I'm telling you. You've got to bring that company with you on that journey, all right, to be successful. And each time I've sort of joined the company, you learn those lessons. So I think that I'm now the sum of the parts that are everything that has gone beforehand. And when I was asked to do the job that I'm currently in, and they outlined, these are going to be the challenges. This is what you're going to face. It's like, yeah, bring it on, because I know how to fix those things.
Before we move on to some of the stuff you're doing right now, like the mentoring and the stuff with Infor, I just wanted to stick with your professional upbringing. Let's call it that, okay? What were the key milestones that stick out for you that really set you on the path that you followed?
Following the degree, I actually did a postgrad certificate in education, which enabled me to become a lecturer. So I actually went into teaching. So I was teaching for 7 years.
Wow.
Now, bear in mind, I'd left school at 16, Gareth. All right. So I'd left school at 16. I barely scraped through with maths, etc. back then. Now I've obtained a degree. All right. So I've now understood how I learn and everything else there.
Sure.
And I now found myself actually teaching in a secondary school. All right. What am I teaching? I'm teaching maths and I'm teaching computer science. But I'm teaching maths up to A levels. All right. I haven't got A levels, remember?
Yeah.
That was interesting. That was an interesting be brave challenge to actually do that. I looked back on what did I want to bring to me as a teacher? All right. What does good look like? And it was certainly not the experience that I had when I was in school, just learn it and everything else. What I wanted to bring was the experience I had, that if anybody, when I explained things, I would ensure, that I did it in a way that was compelling. And if anybody asked me questions, I give practical examples of why it was important, all right? Because that's how I learn. So I wasn't teaching to the top ones in the class. I'm teaching to the whole class to bring them all on, because the ones at the top will learn anyway, all right?
Sure.
But it was bringing it alive. And probably some of the biggest successes I had were with those kids who had been written off. I was asked to actually run the computer science sort of class for these kids as well. Just keep them occupied, because they'll be leaving obviously before the end of the school year. I'm not going to do that. If I'm going to do a course for these kids, then they're going to go away with something. And
sure.
first thing we had to do was what was the common denominator for them all? What would actually get them to come to this class? And we worked out, there was only about 7 or 8 of them. Football was this sort of common theme and everything else. So I actually started teaching them through the medium of football, believe it or not.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, but it was things like they knew everything had been happening over the weekend, the games, they used to follow, the league tables and everything else. Okay. So we set up a spreadsheet that showed how you could keep all of the teams, and then they'd feed in the scores, and then they resorted to see who was now top of the table. All are doing that, but they were learning. All right. We then created a database where they would collect all the facts about the teams, and they'd feed it in, and they'd all of these things. They'd write sort of reports using word processing and everything else. They were using skills, and at the end of it, I said, "Right, I'm not going to enter you in for a certificate related to this," and they all passed.
Wow, that's incredible. You went with the momentum of their enthusiasm, essentially. You pinned the lessons against things you knew they would have the energy to learn. That sums up good teaching right there, doesn't it?
So from a milestone point of view, all right, I always go back to that. So with every job that I've actually done throughout my whole career, it all starts with, to be a great teacher, you have to deliver a compelling lesson. So you've got to do your research to start off with, all right? Understand exactly what it is, and then you have to put it across in a very compelling way. But it all comes back to just being a good teacher. Deliver a compelling lesson is the same as delivering a compelling presentation. So that was sort of key for me. Next milestone, my marriage broke down. All right, and that was probably one of the lowest points in my life. And one of the key lessons that I've learned from this is about mental well-being and having to look after yourself. So at the moment with Infor, I'm actually the global executive responsible for. We have these business resource groups, one of which is people well-being, and I do a lot around sort of talking about mental well-being and the importance of talking openly about these things. All right. So, and I'm very happy to share, I hit the lowest point in my life to the extent at that point, I was hospitalized at that point. All right. And it really low point in my life. And I needed to leave teaching as well at that stage. And how did I get out of that? First of all, I needed to do it for myself. Right? I had a great support infrastructure around me, but I needed to get to the point of working it out for myself as well. And the only way I could actually get through it was looking at all of the things that were bad in my life at that time. What are the things that are actually within your control you can do something about? What are the things that are outside of your control? So of those things that are outside your control, well, what are you worried about? Well, things that have happened in the past, well, forget about that. They've gone.
Sure.
Draw a line. Be kind to yourself. Draw a line. You've made mistakes and everything else, okay? Don't keep sort of playing it over in your mind. And the things you're thinking about in the future, they haven't happened yet. So why are you worried about those, all right? So focus on the here and the now and what you can change. And that allowed me then to see the wood for the trees and to literally sort of plan what I was going to do next and take it from there, but be kind to myself. So from there, I actually left teaching and I actually went to, after a while, I found a job with a company in Cardiff, in actual fact. And they were part of an engineering company, but they were the IT arm of that company. And they were developing a software solution for engineers. And they wanted somebody to join the company with a background in engineering, degree in mechanics, all of that went with it. They wanted somebody with a background in computer science. Well, actually, that was my job. I was head of computer science for the schools, teaching maths and all of that. And somebody who could sell. And he was like, well, anybody can sell. So I joined that company and helped them develop the project costing and billing solution for consulting engineers. We then developed it, and then they were selling it out for internal use, but then selling it out. And over the course of 9 years, we became the top selling solution for consultant engineers in the UK. All right. So it was a big success from there. Next milestone happened. I'd successfully sort of been working with them. We actually had a female managing director at that time. So she was newly appointed, which was great. There was a role for the sort of sales director came up, and I thought I was a shoo-in for this particular role with everything I'd done. Yeah. And she actually turned around and said, being a female managing director, she needed to have a male sales director, assuming that I wouldn't do anything about that. And I resigned on the spot. All right. So this was a big milestone for me after 9 years. And I actually it was probably the best thing that actually happened. And I actually went to the next role. I actually went to work for an international company based in Reading that took me into a different sphere of technology. So this was now into business analytics. So this is a company called Cognos.
They're of IBM fame. I remember their BI
There
tool.
you go. Yeah. So that was brilliant because that gave me, first of all, a grounding in data. And how important is data these days? Everything's about data, and business analytics. But it also gave me international experience. And from there, I then went on to work for a company based at the time in Bristol called Aggresso. And I joined them this is in around about 2000. This would be in the dot-com era, where companies will be informed and go and bust overnight and all of that. It was a very, very exciting time to be selling into those sectors. Yeah. And I actually stayed with that company for 18 and a half years. And the company was acquired in 2000 by Unit4 Business Software. And this was now a global organization. So I started off as a salesperson. And then over the years, they were very acquisitive. I started moving up the sales sort of hierarchy, became sales manager, then became sales director, then sales director of different companies. And then, huge milestone, the incumbent managing director, UK managing director, had a very sad sort of personal circumstance where he needed to step down. I was asked, would I consider the role of managing director? I knew that I didn't know enough to do the role of a managing director. So I went back with a prerequisite to say, yes, I'm happy for my hat to be put into the ring, but I want to ensure that I am educated, right? So I signed up for Institute of Directors course on everything that you need to know to effectively be a director of an organization. My goodness, that's an eye-opener when you realize what you're committing to as a managing director and all the things, governance and compliance and everything else there.
Yeah.
And then I can remember the call, and this went on for a few months, in fact. I had the call on a Saturday morning that said, Anwen, we have made our decision. And I sat there waiting, thinking they're going to say sorry. And they said, we would like you to be the managing director. All right. So
amazing.
That was a huge moment for me. So the first thing that I needed to do, I needed to replace myself because I was the sales director. All right. So I now needed to find a sales director. I also took the incumbent, my board, off the road, explained what we needed to do. At that time, it was a company we had 11 separate legal entities in that company. And there had been no integration of the organization. So there was a lot of inefficiencies. So, a lot of things that we could do by actually bringing it all together. Yeah. So again, coming up with a clear strategy. So I took my board off the road, explained the journey. This was going to be a 5-year journey that we would be on to actually do it. There would be a huge change, but this was what would be the outcome of that. And I went around the table and I asked each one, were they on this journey with me? Because it was going to be tough, right? It was going to be hard work. It was going to be tough. And my finance director resigned on the spot, which was the right thing, all right? Because yeah. And sort of the other changes were made, but it enabled me to then build a team of complementary skills. At the end of it, I had my board comprised over 50% females, not because they were female. Let me stress that, but because they were the right people to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Being a meritocracy was obviously important to you, and you weren't discriminating against anyone. They were the best people for the job.
But again, if you're just thinking, I said I had to replace my role as a sales. I was the sales director. I know what I was good at, so I needed to find somebody who could take it to the next level. All right, so bringing somebody in, Darren Hunt, he's at Oracle now in actual fact. We worked so well together then, all right? Darren coming in, he just helped us drive it to the next level. That's where sort of David Harwood joined.
Of course.
I know you've spoken with David from an R&D perspective, etc. So we just had built a fantastic collaborative, and we had fun. Boy, did we have fun over those years. It was great. What then happened? Private equity stepped in, acquired Unit4 Business Software. First thing they tend to do is to take the whole of the top layer out because they want to impose their own teams and everything else there. So they got rid of all of the managing directors around the globe. I was the only one that was retained, but I was moved into a different role. And that was to set up the partner ecosystem on a global basis, learning new skills and developing strong partnership relationships for the organization. So I stayed there for a few years, and then I joined an Australian headquartered company next, Technology One. Technology One were looking for somebody to come in to solve a lot of key problems that they had in the UK, to turn the company around, to build a culture. And then in March of last year, my third company I've just joined is Infor. And again, this is to drive the company forward during a period of exponential change, I think, on a global basis, that with what
Sure.
organizations are facing now, and the role that technology can play in terms of making a difference is huge. So I'm very excited about the role I'm currently in.
So one thing that stood out for me, Anwen, in all of that amazing stuff that you gave us there is in relation to your ability to manage change. I love that story you told about everyone around the desk. The FD resigned on the spot, but at the end of the day, the people who were left around that table were engaged. They were clear on what they needed to do. And I'm sure it was very successful from thereafter because you'd had that pivotal conversation. So what's the sort of key emphasis points in order to successfully manage change in an organization?
It's the key point that I raised earlier. You've got to have a clear strategy, all right, in terms of where you are now, where you want to get to, and what's the plan for getting there. And there could be a number of phases in that journey that you have to go on. It's recognizing the impact that it has on individuals. Change is never easy. And if you don't communicate therefore very, very clearly why you're doing it, then you will hit against sort of the objections at every step of the way. So it's recognizing that communication is fundamental to the success of any change program. And not just in one way, many different ways of communicating. Don't get into the trap, well, I sent an email out, so obviously I've communicated and people understand. No.
Sure.
Make sure that you have those sort of face-to-face meetings. Give people the opportunity to ask questions. People hear information in different ways, all right? They interpret, depending on their own circumstances, they interpret it in different ways. Give them the opportunity to check, to challenge and everything else. And also be clear to them. And if you've got to have the difficult conversation, explain the reason why. In my own experience, people will accept it if they understand there's a reason for it, all right? But if you don't take the time to do that, and this is, when I talk about bringing people on that journey, when we went through that big change at Unifor, I took the whole company off the road. We were at the Celtic Manor, I remember now, and everybody was there, over 500 people at the time, and outlined exactly what was going to happen. That this was a 5-year journey. The reason why we had to go on this journey, and there's so much change that's happening from a technology point of view. If you didn't make certain changes, you quickly become obsolete. All right. So going through the explanations there. We were also sort of, because there were a number of separate legal entities, so there was duplication of not just systems, but processes and everything else. And a key part of driving effectiveness and efficiency was to consolidate. All right. Consolidate on systems, consolidate on structures, on functions and everything else, which inevitably means that you are reducing in certain areas, but that then enables you to be sort of fit for purpose, to be able to then grow from there and take it forward. But ultimately, there are casualties from that. But I think if you explain it and you then provide the necessary support to the individuals that are impacted, all right, to enable them to sort of, either find different roles within the organization or to find suitable roles outside of the organization. So it's always keeping in mind that you're dealing with people at the end of the day.
You're obviously an excellent communicator, Anwen. You've been a sales.
Then I talk a lot, Gareth. That's what you mean.
No, what I mean is you've worked in sales for a long time, okay? And, you could argue that an MD is a sales role, probably in its purest form, isn't it? What do you look for in a salesperson?
I've been doing this for a long, long time. And I think back to when I first entered this sort of selling. It was very male-dominated profession. Let's call it a profession in that regard. And it was, all about sort of, the biggest commissions, the biggest deals and thumping up the chest and, what are you doing and everything else there. And I got to admit, in the beginning, you think, oh, well, you're going to have to replicate that behavior, and you've got to and you quickly realize that has had its time, that approach. All right. So what do I look for? I look for people, first of all, who listen. All right. Who at the end of the day, it's not about the salesperson. It's about actually listening to the customer's requirements, making sure that you really understand the problems that they're experiencing, because we're in the business to provide solutions to the problems that they're experiencing. And if you don't take the time to fully understand not just where they are now, all right, because they're experiencing now, but where are they going? What's the journey? Where are they going to? And hence, how do we then articulate how we will help them on that journey? All right. So it's,
Yes.
I look for, I think being humble, in actual fact, is a great attribute. Be authentic.
Yeah.
Be authentic is a great attribute. Be curious, all right, and ask those questions. Don't just come in and immediately think and try to sell a product. No,
Yeah.
no. You listen and everything else, and what will naturally come from that, if you can clearly articulate that you're a partner that's going to be there for the long term, that you understand their problems, and you talk about solutions, you talk about business outcomes. Actually, the underpinning technology isn't irrelevant. You've got to obviously have the technology to deliver what you've just been talking about. It becomes this building a partnership with customers, and that's very much the type of salesperson that I look for.
Yeah, 100%. Curiosity is such an important attribute, isn't it? You say that. I read it on your article. And by the way, if the listeners, I'm referring to an article that Anwen wrote a couple of months ago on LinkedIn, Reflections on a Lifetime of Lessons Learned. And curiosity was one of the main things that come up there. And, I completely agree. I'm a bit overly curious sometimes. My wife will why... She calls me, I'm like an owl when we're driving through a new place. I'm just looking because I'm just so curious about everything around me,
But you know what? But it keeps you fresh. It keeps you fresh as well. When things are changing, so if you just sit back and you accept things, well, this is it. This is the status quo. Oh my goodness, I get excited by what's happening, and in technology in particular, the changes that are being affected at the moment are huge, and the opportunity to use technology for good. All right, deliver real sort of clear business value, clear outcomes that will make a real difference excites me.
You made a comment earlier on, Anwen, and it's on the subject of change, because something hasn't changed as much as we would have liked, okay? And that is women in STEM subjects. What are we doing wrong, and what do we need to change to cultivate ambition within females to want to go into leadership roles and go into careers within STEM subjects?
Oh, it's a tricky subject. Obviously, if there had been the golden answer, I think it would have been tackled sort of a long time ago. It's difficult. It starts in the home. It starts with that sort of a lot of stereotyping can start there. It's then if you move into sort of through the school years, I think there's further stereotyping happens right the way through. And you've also got I think girls suffer from, in particular, that voice in the head that I talked about, the imposter syndrome, that type of thing.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that? By ensuring, the message. I've got grandchildren, I've got a granddaughter. You say you are capable of doing anything, and she is Nanny the boss. She loves that type of thing there. But if I can be a role model to say, do not limit yourself. All right, keep your options open at every stage. Don't limit yourself when you're in school. I did, all right, but I, as we said, I was able to make the mistakes and learn from those mistakes. I think that too many doors are shut if you make the wrong decisions early. So it's incumbent upon sort of schools and teachers and courses and everything else there to make these subjects interesting enough that it appeals more to the females, etc. Sometimes these subjects are deemed to be sort of boys only types of things.
Yes.
Don't go into that. So we have to find a way of breaking that stereotyping down and really make it interesting. So I do sort of talk a lot. I do talk in, I'm very happy to go back to schools and talk about my journey and the excitement, talk about what technology can open up, talk about engineering. All right. The doors that having that engineering background has opened for me are phenomenal. And I'm still drawing upon a lot of that, even with what I'm doing now. It opens so many different doors. It is challenging. Funnily enough, I think the pandemic helped in a number of ways as well. But because if you think in terms of, the work-life balance aspects of it, and females do have to make difficult decisions, we are the ones that bear the children that then have the responsibility of, I'm not belittling the father's role in all of this, but at the end of the day, the mother is sort of key from that point of view. So that needs to be supported far better. And funnily enough, the pandemic did, I believe, help in a number of ways. It proved to employers that there are different working styles. It's not the normal 9 to 5. It comes back to, if you are clear on your business strategy, if you set clear objectives, if everybody is clear on the role that they do and what needs to be done to actually deliver the outcomes that that business is required, who cares if you're doing it remotely and you're doing it in the middle of the night? Who cares?
Yeah.
All right. So I applaud those companies that have now turned around and say, we're not going to go back to the old way of working. All right. We are going to be empowering our employees. We trust our employees. I think a lot of the expectation of people should be attending offices because people don't trust that they'll do a damn good job. I'm of the belief that people come to work to do a damn good job. It's incumbent upon us as leaders to empower them, to give them the tools, to give them the support, to enable them to actually become entrepreneurs effectively in their own right, in control of their destinies and everything else there. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Prince's Trust and your mentoring work. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I love the Prince's Trust. So I've worked at the Prince's Trust for a large number of years, and each company I actually sort of head up, I bring them into the trust as well. So I sit on the Trust Technology Leadership Group with a number of other sort of leading technology companies. And if you don't know anything about the trust was set up with the purpose of, again, back in the 70s, in actual fact, there to help underprivileged, disaffected youth, let's call it that, sort of young people who have come through the academic system, didn't get much of it. Think about my own background here, Gareth, but they've reached that point in their lives that they need to turn it around. They want to turn their lives around, all right? Where do they go for that support? The trust provides that support. And it could be from sort of from an education point of view, helping them onto the right courses, to providing funding if they want to set up their own businesses. It's not just give them the money. They've got to prove they want to make a difference. But also, when I join a new company, sometimes you have to look to build a culture within that organization. And I find by getting behind something like the trust, to say, as a company, we are going to all in, to support the trust.
Yeah.
It then builds very quickly a culture within that organization. First of all, of collaboration, of network, of fun, because you can have a lot of fun activities that are associated with it. It builds skills within the organization, lots of these things, all right? So I've done it again now with Infor, and I'll tell you a little bit about. So last year we joined up, so we've signed up for a multi-year sort of raise as much money as possible. And one of the challenges they have is called the Million Makers Challenge. And this is where companies put forward teams, but it's the employees that run this, all right? So I'm just there to help mentor, but they come up with the ideas. And the idea is that the trust will provide seed funding, £1,500 seed funding. And this team are then going to come up with all of the innovation and the ideas to take that seed funding and multiply it as much as they can. So last year, we got involved with gin. We actually started producing gin with a sort of a distiller. So we produced Infor, believe it or not. And that was hugely successful.
That's brilliant. Did you come up with that, Anwen?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't me. It wasn't.
You got a branding specialist in the midst, have we?
But literally, just within 24 hours of launching it, we sold out the first run. So over 200 bottles sort of sold out, and it was a £9 of every bottle went towards the trust. So this was the fundraising.
Okay.
We did wonderful things, like we had celebrities sort of sponsored by. I was in Dubai, happened to bump into Will.i.am. And Will.i.am does a lot with the trust. As I said, oh, no, I've got you. And he did a little promotional video for our team as well.
My God.
So, it was fantastic. And this team, in the first year, they raised over £23,000, which is great. And we actually won an award from the trust. So we're doing it again this year, brand new team again. And they've got to learn skills and all of these things and get involved. But one of the activities we're going to do this year, so I put myself forward, I volunteered. I said, I'll do a wing walk, providing I can raise sponsorship up to £5,000. All right, so customers, partners, employees, etc. I will do a wing walk. I'm doing the wing walk on Saturday, so it's raised 5,600 so far. So again, just a number of different activities underway.
Well, I think by the time we actually release this one, I think the wing walk would have already have happened. But I will still put the link on the show notes anyway. So if people want to support that, then they can. But look, I don't envy you, Anwen. That sounds horrendous. But, incredible cause. So look, tell us a little bit more about Anwen outside of work.
I lived, well, my daughter, during the pandemic, my daughter actually moved fairly close to me. So I'm very pleased that I've got my 2 grandchildren. So literally 2 minutes down the road. So we do spend, spare time is spent with them, wonderful time with them. I'm a painter. When I was in between jobs, I thought, and I started to get bored, I picked up my brushes again, and it rekindled a passion. So yeah, I know that when I eventually retire, this is something I'm going to thoroughly enjoy doing.
Brilliant. I'm starting to think you don't sleep, you get up to so much. But what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self, Anwen? Looking back at your career now, what would you say to that person?
Do you know what? I would say, looking back and talking to that person, I would say, you're going to make lots of mistakes. All right. But you need to make those mistakes because you get stronger and you learn as a result of that. So don't get disheartened in that regard. And I would just say, those seven points that I raised in that podcast: be brave, be authentic, be curious, keep that curiosity, because I think that puts the spark under everything, is that curiosity to keep learning throughout your life. And don't be afraid to open the doors, because there's wonderful things at the other side of the door. So keep opening those doors and be brave, walk through.
Absolutely. And support the Welsh rugby team in the Six Nations.
Don't get me on to everything Wales now, Gareth. Do you know what? When I worked for the Australian company, Technology One, I went down there, and this was during the World Cup, in actual fact. And I was asked to do a company-wide presentation. So I'm standing there on this platform, and they had a look at my slides I was going to use, and they approved them all. But I snuck an extra one in right at the very end. And I was talking about sort of the, everything that had been happening in the organization and the fantastic team spirit. And I said, but I need to call out, there's one team that deserved to be called out. And they were all, because I was going off script now. And where's she going with this now? And I put this slide up, and it was the one moment where Wales were top of the league table. I think it went Wales, New Zealand, Austria. I do know England were 5th.
That one stood out for you then.
I put this up on the screen, and this was going global as well, and the noise in the room was fantastic.
Brilliant. Well, Anwen, thank you so much. I know we've come towards the end of the time now. There's so much more I could have asked you about, but I really appreciate you spending the time and talking to us and being so candid about your incredible career. But thank you for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast.
My absolute pleasure.
Wow, absolutely love that. Anwen is such a great talker, so much wisdom, so much to get your teeth into. But I wanted to distill this into 3 key takeaways. The first one that stood out for me is leadership advice. Make yourself obsolete. Self-explanatory, fantastic advice. So many leaders get this wrong. You need to put in place systems and processes so that the lack of your presence is not going to negatively impact the organization or the collective around you. Number 2, the importance of curiosity and authenticity. Now, I think what Anwen was talking about here is not being afraid to ask the critical questions and sometimes risk looking a little bit silly. Childlike curiosity, or having the bravery to have childlike curiosity, is sometimes an enormous asset and really helps you understand the problems or the concepts, or and make better decisions against whatever it is you just understood or learned. I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. And the third one, using an existing vehicle to teach a new concept. So basically, I'm talking about Anwen's story about teaching a team about IT through the medium of something that they enjoyed. In this case, it was football. Thought that was genius. Absolutely, that is such an applicable thing, I think, for anyone who's trying to teach, mentor, or get across a new idea. I thought that was fantastic. Brilliant interview, really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for downloading this episode. We really love doing this show and are absolutely humbled by all of the incredible people who download and listen, plus the incredible guests who take the time to come on and share their secrets and experiences with our listeners. Please, can I ask that you take a couple of seconds to subscribe or follow the show? This small action means a lot to us and helps us greatly. Thank you. As you quite possibly have heard me mentioning in the past, we record the mass majority of our episodes at an amazing studio facility here in Cardiff at Tramshed Tech. Tramshed Tech is a collaborative community of entrepreneurs and scaling businesses geared towards supporting growth in tech, digital and creative industries across an ever-increasing collection of locations and partner locations, UK-wide and internationally. It really is the perfect place for your business to start up, scale up, accelerate or innovate. Head over to tramshedtech.co.uk or just search Tramshed Tech on your favourite social media platform.